So it's great to be back at Vivix again and see some familiar faces. I'm going to talk, like Koza says, the title is Talking Television, how consumers are changing the conversation, and share some of our insights. Hopefully there hasn't been too much talk about voice. I only arrived at lunchtime because I was in Dubai speaking yesterday in my mad life. Just wanted to just quickly recap on last year, and obviously last year we talked about trading up and talked about what we termed then the Hydra interface, and the learnings that we'd been through to bring the latest generation of the TiVo experience to life. What would the UX actually do? What was our philosophy? How were we going to make it better? And over the last year we've actually been answering those questions, and it culminated last week in the launch of the TiVo Bolt Vox product, which brings that TiVo, what's now called TiVo Experience 4 user interface, together with some of the technologies that we brought when we brought out the two companies of Rovi and TiVo together. And predominantly the big piece there was actually the voice. Many long hours of development, testing and integration went into this, and it launched last week with some rave reviews. And I think what's interesting there as well is we're not just looking forward with voice in this product. Obviously, we've got the new Bolt Vox box and the Vox mini boxes as well, but we're also putting out there what we're calling the Vox Remote, where if you're an existing TiVo subscriber in North America, you can get a new remote with a USB stick that sticks in the back and actually enable voice into the legacy base as well. So what we're kind of seeing is these kind of 5 trends that are actually changing the TV market as it is now. Obviously, I think we've heard quite a lot about personalization, hopefully, today. Being visually rich is obviously key. The transition to IP and IP delivery, and then the flexibility. But for us, what we want to focus on today, and talking with Koza about how we did this, was really around voice and how that's changing the user interface and the user experience. Hopefully, most people in this room will understand the difference between what is a digital assistant and what is a device that helps deploy a digital assistant. But I still, when I talk to people, and even this week talking with some folks, actually, some people aren't quite clear. So what we have is we have the digital assistants, so the smart pieces, the AI, the systems that are learning and understanding and responding. And then you've got a bunch of devices that are actually helping to deliver that into the marketplace. So, I mean, the assistants and the Siris, the Googles, the Cortanas of the world. And obviously they are being pervasive right across our lives now. So smartphones, the speakers that we see in the homes, in desktops, laptops, more and more into vehicles, toys, everything. And clearly entertainment in the entertainment space is somewhere that they're making big inroads. And when we look at voice, for me, this is a quote that comes to mind. The last 60 years, humans were adapting to computers. The next 60 years, actually, the computer's going to spend more time adapting to us than we are to it. And really, we believe voice will lead the way. And it's going to be a revolution that's going to change everything. If you think about in the search space, actually, the last few years, we've been trying to narrow down how we enter what we're looking for into a device. So we're trying to find 2, 3 keywords that we can type easily into Google. Actually, if we allow people to speak, suddenly they start asking questions again. They start using much more expansive sets of queries and start framing them as sentences and questions. So it is really quite different to how we interact and how we unconsciously interact with the device as well. And there's somewhere where we see that already, obviously, is in the internet search space and some of the figures that we see around this. So, and some of these actually are now probably need updating. The latest figures I could find were tending towards 2016. So when we see 2017, I think we'll actually see some significant shifts in these. But 20% of the Google mobile searches are made by voice. And even in 2016, that was up 35% from 2008. Similarly, in the Microsoft space, 25% of all Bing searches are voice searches. And you'll have heard this one before as well. By 2020, Comscore say that 50% of all searches will be made or initiated through voice. And actually, MediaPost also say that by then, 30% of them will be to devices that don't even have a screen to feed back on. If you look at that, and then you look and think, well, this year, Google alone will handle 2 trillion searches. So extrapolate that forward, even if there's no growth in their search, that would be 1 trillion voice searches in 2020. So this is really is some huge numbers. And the other thing is, people always talk about the error rate. Will it understand me? Is it good enough? Actually, if you look and see, even since July last year, we've gone from error rates of 8.5% to error rates of below 5%. And if you think, there's studies from Microsoft that say human error rate is around about 5.1. So in a very controlled set of circumstances, actually, the computer is better at understanding us than we are ourselves. Interesting. A lot of that, though, is to do with it being online and the NLU and the AI behind learning and constantly improving itself. I think we've all had experiences. I always think of in the car as the predominant one where actually the devices up till now haven't really been online. Is it not necessarily very good? If you're using one of the online systems, and actually you'll see as you use it, it gets better and better. And you sometimes get that frustration when you're out of network and you go Siri and it goes, can't do anything because I'm not online anymore. But we do have to be careful here because it's not just about that core language. We've still got a lot of work to do in this space around regional accents, around understanding how people change over time and being able to adapt to that, how new terms come in. So while there is we're getting around the human kind of standard, actually that's quite controlled. So there is still a way to go. And I think one of the things we learned recently was when we were doing the Sky launch for Sky Q Voice, which we're the NLU behind, was the amount of focus that we had to put into making sure that it worked right across the UK. And it's not just the UK's natural or native dialects and languages, actually there's all of the immigration as well. And so the range of different ways of saying different things is huge. So like I live in Newcastle and people say, that's a really canny film. That's pretty hard for a computer to understand. Oh, that's quite a good film. So there's a lot that goes into this, but it is getting better and better and better. The other area around is actually the assistants and how they're becoming pervasive in the entertainment space. So if we look at the figures behind what assistants are actually being used for, so in the smartphone space, then number one is playing music. And if you look, actually, entertainment dominates. And if you go into the smart speaker space, then it's even more so. Actually, these devices, you could say they're designed to deliver entertainment, but then that's how people are using them as well. And especially when you look at those and you think, actually, a lot of the time, you need to have those use cases that make sense. So turning to some of the research that we've done, and we do, as a company, do a lot of research around the world, and we do things like every quarter in the US, we run a big quarterly survey around pay TV and OTT subscribers. And one of the things we started looking at and asking them more recently is around home assistant devices. And so what we've seen is that more and more people are getting these in the home. Interestingly, Google Home in the North American market seems to dominate on a discrete device basis, but obviously if you add in the Amazon numbers together, actually Alexa behind those is more predominant. And it's something we'll continue to track going forwards. When we ask those people that had the device if they used it to find video to watch or video content to watch on another device, such as your TV, then actually now half of them, yes, I do that. I'm starting to do it. And growth quarter on quarter, actually in the first half of this year, was pretty big. The other area where, and I think if you look particularly in the operator space around, is how are we implementing voice, is on the remote control in the first instance. I think we will see an ecosystem that develops and a mix of near field and far field, but a lot of the operators in the first instance are putting it into the remote. And so some of the examples around the three on the right-hand half of the screen are all powered by our NLU. And if we look at the features, it's becoming increasingly valuable to people, and they're saying that. So half of consumers use voice at least once a day. At least once on their devices. 12% use it every day. Tends, when we look at the demographics, to skew towards higher incomes and grads, but maybe just because that's the people who've got the devices. What is interesting, though, is that more than half of people actually would say they'd pay some more money for it, which from an operator view is quite important. When we look at the actual conversational interface themselves and how often they use it and how many times people use it, what we're seeing is that tending to go more and more. So 87% of consumers who have the ability to do it are using it on a weekly basis. If you compare that on a normal kind of text search input, actually just only half of people say they'll type into a search screen. So what we're seeing actually is this is enabling more people to be able to search more because of the simplicity of it. And one of the things we've always said is actually it removes the need to search for search. You don't have to delve through an interface and press 10 buttons to actually get to the search function before you even try and type something in. If you can just click a button on a remote and speak, or you can just say, device assistant, do this for me, actually that's really seamless. And then also if you think about it, actually you can talk a lot faster than you can type, and especially with a remote control. So it kind of enables that kind of getting to the content quicker. So you don't have that experience of going down and having to click through multiple menus, and those menus not necessarily making sense because the systems have been implemented around rules that are not necessarily user-centric. They're more business-centric or contract-centric, even worse. So content sits in a place where it's not really a natural place from a user point of view, but it's there because that's the deal that we did with the studio that says it needs to be under this category. So it kind of helps shortcut some of that kind of piece. It also makes it fun and interesting. And the other area where we're finding actually it's really helping is to try and bring together some of the commands that can be quite difficult. So if you think about if you've got a system with some apps and you know there's some content in one of those apps, being able to just say play Star Trek on Netflix, actually, and Star Trek starting, rather than having to go and find Netflix, go into their UI, then go and find Star Trek and then play it. Actually, that simplification is really, really there. And similarly with TV settings. So things like turning the brightness up, actually, that's quite cumbersome. But crucially, what we're trying to get to, especially the conversational piece and the more advanced voice systems that really understand what people are saying and understand how people say things differently, is having that ability to have that kind of turn the brightness way up. What does way up mean? Actually, it can mean different things for different people, so we need to be able to balance that off. And similarly, being able to issue commands like record all the Simpsons episodes on TV. Actually, that could be quite a number of steps, but actually, we really simplify it. And some of the other areas as well, things like turning on subtitles. If you're watching a piece of content and you suddenly realize, actually, it's one of those ones where the audio levels are really rubbish, and actually I could benefit with some subtitles. How do I get to the subtitles? I don't use them very often. if I can just go turn on the subtitles and appear, actually, we're really changing up the experience for the customers. I think, has anyone seen the Sky Q advert with Anthony Joshua? Recently, in the past couple of weeks, Sky have really been pushing the voice and the new voice control features of the Q platform. And there's a great advert going around. I saw it on Facebook, but I think it's other places as well, where Anthony Joshua, the boxer, is talking about his fight with Klitschko, and is able to just go to X minutes, rewind 40 seconds so I can see that punch again. It really is a very nice user experience that is really, I keep saying simple to use because it is simple to use, but it really improves the experience. So some of the figures that we see both in the survey, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about actually some usage from one of the platforms that we work with. If we look at the pay TV users in the US, round about now, what we're seeing across our survey base is just under 11% of people actually have the voice search, and about just under shy of 20% of those who don't have it say they want it, which is encouraging. What we are seeing, though, is the number of searches that people do and the changes in that. So less than one search a week, so basically that's people who don't really use it at all, continues to fall, as does 1 to 3. But what we do see is 31% of people conduct 4 to 7 searches a week, which is about 7.3% rise quarter on quarter. And then in the 8 to 11 searches a week, 16.8%, which again is just shy of 7% rise quarter on quarter. So what we're seeing happening is actually as people start to use it, they start to embrace it, and they start to use it more, which obviously is what we expect. And I think if you saw the Sky results, I think they said 9 million voice searches on Q since they launched it. So it's there. But really going into actual kind of more detail of the type of searches people are doing. So what we looked at was across 10 months across one of the US operators that we work with, and took the data and said, right, we'll look and see the types of searches that people are doing. So predominantly, people are saying a show title. Kind of expected. That's what people naturally are going to think they can do. Second group, and that group, that's about 78% of the, or 78.1% of the voice searches were for a specific title. The second group, channels, and that's either saying a channel name or saying a channel number, is 14.2%. Then we've got the next group is what we call true conversations. So that's the kind of questions like, what's on TV tonight? The more expansive, more opening type of questions is over the last 10 months was 3.8%. Then you've got the commands like volume up, change of settings, 1.8. Interestingly, personality, so the actors, actually is very small. You kind of might expect that's going to be a similar kind of level to a show title, or certainly slightly higher than it is at 1.6%. But it's clear that people at the moment aren't really thinking that they can search for a specific actor, or maybe they're not interested in searching for a specific actor a lot of the time. And then similarly on genre, again, is very, very small, almost minuscule, at only 0.3%. I think what we do see in this is actually an education problem as well, is that I think with the conversational piece, and especially those ones, and I'll show you a video in a moment of a number of examples, is that unless you actually tell people and talk to them about what they can do and market it to them, they don't naturally think that these interfaces are as clever as they are and as capable as they are. So I think as we see Sky doing a lot of education at the moment around the Sky Q platform and what's possible on there. I think as we see other operators embrace this, then actually we'll see a lot more usage in that space as well, of not necessarily just people just using it for titles. The other thing that's really interesting as well, and it points probably, I don't know whether anyone talked about how deeply talked about personalization this morning, but within all of these systems, be it text-based or be it actually, and it really comes to the fore when you're using voice, is around the intent, and it is about me. It's all about me, me, me. Every single query, you can tap onto it, me or the group, because that's what people are asking. So what's on TV tonight? I'm not asking for the Radio Times list back. I'm not asking for a standard grid back. Actually, I'm asking for what's my programs for tonight? What's the things that I really want to watch? What do you know I like to watch? What do you think I might like to watch? If you've got recommendations and predictions as well. Similarly with movies. So find me movies with Tom Hanks. I want to see the ones that I like. There's going to be some in there that maybe I don't like, that don't necessarily want to appear on the first screen. And similarly, what free horror movies are available? Actually, I want the ones that are on the services that I can get. I don't just want a list of content.
Let's start with something simple. What's on TV right now? So we get back a list of shows that are tailored to us but available on TV now. I want to watch some NBA basketball. So here I'm changing the context, changing into sports, and getting back a list of the basketball games that are on. What's the movie with Russell Crowe where he won an Oscar? So here we're going a little bit more specific, asking for an actor and asking for the film where he won an award and getting back the results of Gladiator. I want to watch an action movie on Friday night. So here we're getting a bit more specific about time, asking to what's coming back and available on Friday night. What's the movie where Ben Stiller plays a male model? So here looking for a particular actor and looking for the role that they played. Show me some films about the financial crisis. So here we're taking something a little bit more abstract like the financial crisis that's not generally available within the metadata around a movie, and packaging that up and bringing back the list of films that relate to the financial crisis. I want to watch a James Bond film without Sean Connery. So here we're looking at using a negative and taking a specific actor out of a film from a series of films where we've had multiple actors play the same role. What's the movie with Eddie Murphy where he plays multiple roles? So here again, an example of taking an actor who's played multiple roles within a specific movie and bringing back those results. Show me some movies filmed in space. So looking for space movies and getting back the results again. What's the movie that features the BMW headquarters? So here what we've done, we're looking for something that's not necessarily contained within the traditional metadata about the program. The fact that Rollerball was filmed at the BMW headquarters. I am your father, Luke. We're talking about Luke Skywalker, and we get back the specific movie where that line came from.
So that actually jumped to video before I even introduced it. So I was going to say, first of all, some of you may have seen that because actually it's one of our videos that's actually a little bit older now. But it shows some of the real kind of use cases and some of the examples around how the NLU is able to understand, even if it doesn't quite, you'll have seen on there, didn't pick up all the words, but it understood what the intent of what the person was saying. And things like the one, show me movies filmed in space. There aren't any movies filmed in space. We don't send the whole camera crew up. There's a few things off the ISS maybe. There's a little bit off the moon. But actually what we're looking for is movies that are set in space, not filmed in space. So it's understanding that actually that's what the user means. But also being able to put together those kind of complex queries that you'd ask somebody in the same room as you, but you haven't necessarily been able to go and ask of a system. And what we see, and I think what we'll see more and more of is obviously as voice becomes more and more prevalent, and I think it's almost getting to the stage of, if it's not already, if you're an operator if you're not considering putting it in, then you're not really considering where you're going for the future. It is pretty much table stakes. It's what's being come to expect. And also, as we see more and more of this drive from particularly the big tech companies, the big consumer companies, the Amazons, the Googles of the world, who are pushing this, it really does become that is an expected piece of the user interface. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight, brings out some of the figures. We'll continue as we go through to look and monitor this, and hopefully be able to share more and more information as it becomes available. So, happy to take questions.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
If you don't want to ask a question here, that's how you can reach me.
Questions?
That's really interesting. I was wondering if you had any insights about how the different uses of voice vary over age. So, I mean, I just can't use voice at all. It just feels completely alien to me. But my 4-year-old will not only ask for things, but he'll also say please at the end. And I was just wondering how the more kind of sort of imperative ways of using it to the more conversational, how that was kind of changing with the sort of different demographics.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't got anything. We've got the demographic split. We haven't actually published any of the demographics, but one kind of anecdotal thing we have seen is the expectation of everybody was that it would skew towards a younger audience because they kind of more had grown up with it, and it's still, for us, older generations, feels a little bit awkward sometimes. What I actually found is actually the older generation than us, actually, if you give them the device and tell them how to use it, then they really appreciate it because they didn't grow up with the complicated interfaces that we introduced. So actually it takes them back to having a simple product, especially in the television space, so older people, where they can't necessarily read what's on the screen anymore without getting out a pair of glasses or having to look over the end of the glasses or whatever. Or they're not that familiar anymore, the dexterity's going. Actually, being able to just speak, really, I want to watch the last Coronation Street. Hey, bang, it's on the screen. And also it knows what the last one was, that is the last one for me too, which is also important. But I think it's one thing, we've got the numbers there, so we will look at it and see. But it's interesting because you've got the two groups, one on either end, and then us kind of middle generation and stuff. Yeah.
So sort of related to that, when you've got these very sort of general questions like play music or what's on TV tonight, what are your sort of thoughts on how that then actually resolves down to something specific, and whether it's if it's a sort of really, really general question like play music, whether there's stuff that's going to be excluded and never surfaced, and kind of how you end up with what kind of biases you get in response to those kind of questions, and what, if any, sort of obligation or motivation does the platform owner have to either counter that or kind of affect it at all?
Yeah, I mean, a lot obviously is linking to, it's implicit that you obviously have a recommendation system behind it, and how that recommendation system works is obviously going to influence what the results are and how you tweak that recommendation system and what your business rules are behind it. And obviously each and every operator is going to have a slightly different set. I think what's the kind of, you also have to bring in a lot around the kind of the context and the time. So if you had a very general question, what's on TV? Miss out the tonight bit. Obviously you're going to get a different set of results depending on what time of day it is, what room you're in, what kind of device you're doing it on. Potentially, if you've got more kind of like a far field device, so if you're talking to an Echo or that kind of device that can understand that maybe there's more than one person in the room, actually that's going to influence the mix of results back as well.
Yeah, so just my youngest daughter actually uses the device for her homework, actually, so she goes up and asks multiplication questions. Just two...
They are great for cheating, aren't they?
Just two questions. Natural language, just who do you partner with? Is that powered by Nuance, or...
We have a public agreement with Nuance So it's one of them, but we're agnostic to it. So.
Okay, so it could be Soundify
It could
or
be,
a bunch of, okay.
And a lot of that also depends on country as well.
Okay.
So there's some people who are specialists more in one language than another. So.
And just in that personalization bit that you were talking about there in terms of the recommendation, I guess in a household where it can't actually distinguish from person, can it? So it doesn't know who's asking what questions. So, or can you?
Well, you can, because I mean, and we did 2 CESs ago. We did a demonstration using Nuance's voice biometrics. So being able to switch seamlessly between user profiles. The challenge has always been, and Ashley said it himself, we don't log into television. Because the premise has always been you don't log into television, although interestingly actually when you look at some of the OTT services that manifest on the screen, actually now people do log in and choose a profile. Being able to do that seamlessly just by detecting the different voice is there, and I've said it multiple times, if it's good enough for banking, then it's good enough for our industry to be able to produce a recommendation or prediction.
Hi. Yeah, very, very good presentation and obviously really compelling use of engaging in a user experience. Do you have any views on the perceived or real sort of privacy concerns people may have in this space? I know it may not actually be a factor for some people, but you do hear some people voicing personal concerns of that. Do you think it's going to slow this down, or do you think it's a non-issue?
I wouldn't want to say it's a non-issue. I think it's obviously there's different, depending on where you are in the world, different cultural expectations around privacy. It's something obviously we've got to be very careful of. Whether or not it'll slow it down, I don't know. I think there's a lot to be said that actually it's consumers are embracing it, and it's because of the ease of it, and maybe. I guess the important thing is to make sure they understand what they're doing and where that data goes and how that data is controlled. So, and obviously making sure that it is controlled and it's not just a free-for-all.
Charles, you mentioned in terms of education. Is there an idea that devices like Amazon Echo, home speakers in other words, could they be a gateway into using voice for searching video content?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like I said, I think it's not just going to be one device. Actually, there'll be a whole ecosystem. And we've already, with Dish in the US, there's already an Alexa skill that you go, hey Dish, what's on TV? And it goes into Alexa, it goes out around the back through us, and comes up on the screen. So I think you have to do that. You can't just limit yourself just to the one direct input, because people are going to have those devices in their home, and the expectation is that actually I'm doing my lights off it, I'm doing this off it, I'm doing that off it, I can play Spotify off it. Why can't I do my telly off it?
Hello. Hi, Charles.
Hi.
Thanks for the mention. That 3.8% that's conversational, I'm just wondering if you've got any more insight into whether there's a trend there, how well it responds to education by operators versus the people who are using it conversationally already have an Alexa in the house and are therefore have a higher expectation. Or maybe it's demographic, like one of the other questions asked.
I don't think I have yet, but obviously as we go forwards, because it's the first set of results, I don't think we've got asking the same question going backwards, because we've only just really started looking at it, but going forwards definitely is one thing that we'll look at as to how that's being influenced, and certainly look at the operators who are pushing it more as to, is there a bigger growth in that area?
Do you think there will be, I mean...
I think so. I think one of the things, the thing that we compared it back to was actually with the initial kind of launches around TV Everywhere, and there was a big expectation around TV Everywhere, and then the initial usage was quite low, and then when people started actually pushing it and telling users about it, actually it grew. And similarly, even way back with DVR.
Yeah.
People didn't used to do it, and then when Sky basically pushed and pushed and pushed, that was it. It was out there and it became the default. So,
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Charles.
No problem.